Hello and welcome to Story Radio. This month we have a recording from one of our live events at the Colony Rooms, and this time we set a theme of love, as it was very close to Valentine's Day. And we were interested to see what new material might be generated by having a theme. How do you think it went, Tabitha? Did you enjoy it?
I really enjoyed it. We had a very frank and funny, no-holds-barred story from Kristin Burniston, which I thought really set the tone for the event. And we had lovely reading by Lindsay Gillespie of her story Lover Man, which we featured on here once before.
But Lana Citron's live demonstration of kissing from her book, didn't we?
Yes, very funny. Lana's such a brilliant person to listen to live because she really interacts with the audience and makes everything into an event.
Yeah, and I think Mickey ignored the theme altogether, but it was a good story all the same.
It was about a man on the way to see his lover in Dublin after just before lockdown, I imagine. So there was a reference to love there, but a lot of it was about the unbearableness of other people on his flight, which is very entertaining.
Yeah, and then there was your story about computer love.
That's right. Funnily enough, I wrote this years ago, but I'm now studying how to code. I think in a funny way, I think this story, which is very much about women in a men's world, was perhaps showed how interested I already was in computing and coding.
Yeah, and then I had a story about, I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, proposal and consequences.
Yes, your main character, Paul, is very, very funny with his sort of funny but also tragic with his sort of obsession with money and wanting to improve his lot in life and his struggle to sort of be among the people that he has to be among in order to achieve that.
Have a listen and I hope you enjoy it. And our next event is coming up in June and it's the theme
June the 9th.
June the 9th, and the theme is libraries. Well, a library, the library.
We're still considering submissions, so if any of you out there are writers and want to send something in, send it in via our submissions page and put library in your subject line.
Okay,
thanks very much. Hello everybody, and welcome to Story Radio, the podcast for readers, writers and lovers of literature everywhere. I'd like to introduce our first writer, Kristin Burniston. I just want to tell you that Kristin's got amazing nail art on her fingers, so I'm hoping she'll show you, but she's got some beautiful Valentine's hearts. Kristin is a graduate of the MA Screenwriting programme at the University of the Arts London. In 2023, her short films scripts Tree and Hairy Mary were selected by the City of Angels Film Festival, the Women Over 50 Film Festival and Best Script London. This year, Hairy Mary made it to the finals for the Slip Film Fund, and both Tree and Hairy Mary have reached the semi-finals of the Go Creator short film competition. Kristin's currently working on a children's animation set in London, a crime fiction TV series, and a feature film script based on her novel. Thank you.
I've got two stories with you too.
Oh, and two stories as well.
Story Radio.
Story Radio. Lovely. Okay.
So I wrote this for this event. Okay, thank you so much. It doesn't have a title. I have a confession to make. Never have I ever been on a dating app. I know, you're thinking to yourself, what? Who is the sexist old crone who stands before us? Has she never experienced the pleasure of being sent a dick pic? No wonder who would swipe right on her. She's obviously a lefty who doesn't know what she's missing. Miss, I'll tell you what I miss. I miss intense crushes, IRL flirtations, a wink, a smile, a shared frisson between strangers. Pre-digital dating, I loved the ritual. I liked the asking, the time leading up to the date, the surprise, the power, the anticipation. As a teenager, there was no chance we'd ask our parents for a sleepover with our boyfriends. Girls weren't meant to have sex before marriage. As this could lead to pregnancy, and pregnancy was visible and thus shameful, proof that a girl had sought pleasure. In doing so, she was an embarrassment to her parents, as she had sinned under the eyes of God. Though, do you really think it was right for God to be watching two horny teenagers getting it on? Perhaps it goes without saying, but these rules never applied to boys, all of whom had cars with back seats ready-made for making out, and parents who were never at home, where soft sofas and carpeted floors could be put to good use for whiling away the hours exploring one another's bodies. At university, away from our parents, there was the opportunity for sex everywhere. Drunken nights of passion, illicit kisses, wanting, needing, and finding love in doorways and behind closed doors in equal measure. Strangers would ask one another out on the spur of the moment, and we might invite that stranger home. We'd allow ourselves to be set up on blind dates and spent hours canvassing the opinion of friends of what they thought of the tall, dark, and handsome guy. And do you think someone so hot would be interested in little old me? I miss intense crushes. Or maybe that is just my American experiences. My British friends didn't really date, but instead seemed to be serial monogamists. Dating here always seemed embarrassing. Americans, always greedier, approach matchmaking and lovemaking with a capitalist zeal, with more being our ethos, accompanied with a returns policy of try it before you buy it. I am often asked how I ended up over here. I like to refer people to the fictional character of Colin Frizzle in Love Actually. But my own Love Actually moment happened 12 years before the film's release, and in my opinion, was infinitely better. Perhaps after hearing my story, you might agree that Richard Curtis owes me royalties. It was the summer of 1991, and I was lonely in the stifling hot and very conservative city of Durham, North Carolina, far from Madison, Wisconsin, my beloved liberal university town with its swimmable lakes, car-free streets, and bicycle lanes. I was in Durham for a summer internship in charge of all transportation logistics for ADF, the American Dance Festival. At the time of my move, my boyfriend of over 2 years and I had decided to break up, but remain friends. So he began his life as a single man by driving 30 hours from Madison to San Francisco, which was still a hippie gay town, just a few years away from giving both its soul and heart to the dark overlords of tech. He fully took advantage of being the only straight guy in town and immediately embarked on his summer of love. On the opposite side of the country, at the Contemporary Dance Festival, the few men I met were gay or old or both. Never had I been so lonely. So when I had the chance to chaperone a Chinese dance troupe 5 hours north to Washington, D.C., I jumped at the chance. Despite being a terrible driver, I drove a van full of passengers, which included Miss China, and a translator whose only knowledge of English came from Madonna songs. Gulf War I was in full swing, and my Chinese guests wanted to buy all the merch. I was fully embarrassed by America, what we represented, and what the crap we exported. The Chinese dancers did not seem to share my view. As I went off to buy all the warmongering merch, I took myself to the Hirshhorn Gallery in search of culture and solitude. This grunge girl was so happy to be in a city that I made an effort to change out of my daily look of ripped denim shorts, baggy t-shirt, and bare feet, and into little black heeled sandals, a mini purple swing skater's dress, and a bit of lippy. Being from a small town, I had the habit of smiling and saying hello to everyone, even to strangers. Can you imagine if someone you didn't know said hi to you? You'd probably ignore them or scowl, or, if you're feeling a bit more generous, spend the entire day racking your brain, wondering how you knew this person. You might find the whole thing embarrassing. But if you're a young English lad on a solo trip to the States, and let's say you're partial to American women, you might find my innocent smile a come-on. I noticed him, as I noticed everyone. I was curious, always people watching, over a decade before my phone would become a distraction. He looked different from the men I usually fancied, in his red high-top Converse, bright red Bermuda shorts, and t-shirt with a homemade graphic design. He was bald. I thought he was dead. Standing in front of two paintings, one by Willem de Kooning and the other by Jasper Pollock, he dared ask me which painting I liked, and I had the audacity to say neither. But my summer had been lonely, and his English accent meant that I was interested in continuing the conversation, so I invited him out that evening. He accepted. When he turned up that night for our date, I was glad that I had asked him out. He looked handsome in his all-black outfit, which showed off his tan skin. As a poor university student, I was easily impressed that a man only 3 years older than me could afford to pay for cabs and champagne and chocolate-dipped strawberries. Hours later, on the grass, under the gaze of old Abe, next to the reflecting pool, between long, intense kisses, I removed my tongue from his mouth to tell him that I loved him. I was so embarrassed. I had never told anyone I loved them, ever. Not my family, certainly not another guy, nor a friend. Never. To show love was vulnerability, a softness. It was an open door to heartbreak. Why did I say something so ridiculous to someone I had only known for about 4 hours? Was it his South London accent that made me swoon? Was it the champagne that had gone to my head? Perhaps it was our view of the Washington Monument, suggestive in its 555 feet of erect phallicness. All I know is that he felt something for me too, as we made plans to meet the next day at noon, under a tree on the White House lawn. But my work commitments changed, and this meant I was going to be late, with no way of getting in touch with him. This being 1991, the time before mobile phones and email. I was so upset. Here was my one chance at a summer romance, and it wasn't meant to be. When I finally arrived at the tree, 4 hours later, he was still there, waiting for me. I couldn't believe it. But I had to leave almost immediately for North Carolina, and my colleagues and the other chaperones did not approve of me offering a strange man a place in the van. So the Englishman did what any sensible, horny person without a driver's license would do. He hopped a Greyhound bus. We'd see each other soon, in 4 hours and 30 minutes. He could stay with me, and we could continue last night's passions. I returned the Chinese dancers back, safe and sound. But back at my cute little summer sublet, shared with 2 roommates, I waited and waited, and the 4.5 hours passed to 5, to 6, to 10. I became paranoid. Had I been duped? Duped out of what? I'm not sure. Not money, certainly, nor sex. But he had stolen my heart, and with every hour that passed, I began to feel vulnerable, then angry. And so, I filed a missing persons report and described him down to the mole on his lower back. As the police were taking my statement, the Englishman appeared. Very tired, dehydrated, and not impressed with either Greyhound or its passengers, whose main activity seemed to be locking themselves in the loo, unable to get out, delaying the journey while the driver dealt with the problem. That day, National Express went up in his estimation. So here we were, 5 a.m. in Durham, North Carolina, with roommates who were concerned about allowing a strange man to stay in the house. As they woke early to assess giving him the boot, they were immediately won over by his English accent, declaring him charming. It became immediately evident that they preferred him to me. The Englishman and I had a few passion-filled days that made us sore and tired. But when it was time for him to fly back to London, I was a bit sad, but I was also very glad at him leaving as, frankly, he never stopped talking. Ever. I'd never known a man to speak so much. Remember me saying earlier how lonely I'd been? Well, just before the Washington, D.C. trip, I had convinced my ex-boyfriend to fly out from San Francisco to visit me. Things picked up as we left him, and he left me a surprise. It was a gift of crabs, which I didn't notice as they didn't like me, but like my roommates, they preferred the Englishman, so much so that they hitched a ride back to England. Oopsie. Thank God for the NHS, huh? I knew about the opportunistic transatlantic traveling parasites through a letter. It wasn't the only letter I received from the Englishman. They came with regular frequency, and I thought they were all charming, intelligent, and just plain lovely, my favorites being written in the all-night Italian cafe across from the seedy Scala Cinema in King's Cross. When I was back with my parents in small-town Wisconsin, and he was with his parents on the Isle of Wight, I surprised him with a phone call. Let's just say he was glad to hear from me. So after 10 months, that included a transatlantic return flight each, mine paid for with a student loan, and phone bills as expensive as the flights, I came over in 1992 to experience an English summer. I wasn't impressed. And yet I stayed. Back then, London did not do PDA, public displays of affection. I ignored this and took it as my mission to turn grey, dirty, uptight London into romantic, spring-like Paris. I wanted to show love wherever I felt the urge. No space was safe. Parks, pubs, sandwich shops. The more I noticed people being shocked, the bigger my PDAs became. My youthful ideal making it my duty to shake everyone out of what I saw as their repression. What I didn't tell you was that on the night we met in Washington, D.C., our cab driver, a Sikh gentleman originally from India, had predicted that we were going to get married. I stopped trying to hickey the English boy's neck to state with clarity and conviction, I am never getting married. I am an American feminist. That statement remained true until November 1992. All decision making up to this point had continued to be made by lust and lust alone until immigration forced my hand. So on a rainy, cold night, the toy ring bought from Hamley's on my £2.58 hourly salary from working at the Gates Cinema, I proposed a solution to the visa problem. On one knee, toy ring in hand, I said something like, will you marry me on the condition that we'll get divorced if it doesn't work out? Listener, he said yes. But it's not all toy rings, champagne, and strawberries. Being married isn't easy, and life isn't always happy. It can be hard, and living in someone else's culture brings its own challenges. 30 years later, a life, a child, and a dog. Well, I'm still here. I still like an English accent, particularly our daughters. On a final note, in 1999, we got to stand in front of the Jackson Pollock painting again. It was hanging in Tate Gallery for a short retrospective. Listener, this time we agreed. It was splendid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristin. For our next reading, I'd like to introduce Lindsay Gillespie. Lindsay was born in South Wales and lives in South Downs. She's been a graphic designer, illustrator, lived in New Delhi, Washington, DC, France, and taught English in Tokyo. And she's won lots of prizes. She was a Costa Short Story Award finalist and finalist in the Bridport Short Story Prize, and lots of other stuff. She's been featured on Story Radio quite a few times, and if you look on our archives, you can find her. Lindsay.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mark.
So I'm going to read you a story about music and soul. It's a story about soul music, and it's called Lover Man. Livingston Franklin was on late at St. Jude's, but by some fluke tonight he was an historic 10.5 minutes early. Time enough for a visit to the shrine of the goddess McGranahan. Simone McGranahan was in charge of the staff canteen in the underworld of the hospital basement, and Livingston had long worshipped the rubber mat she stood on. The canteen queue swelled out into the corridor, and Livingston nodded away. He knew most everyone: cleaning crew, the medic, security, and obviously all the nurses at St. Jude's. He flipped his lanyard, so if you half squeezed your eyes, you could make out the little promotion he'd awarded himself. Dr. Livingston, it said, just for a laugh. The goddess had honked pungently through her nose when she'd spotted it. Livingston worked 2 jobs, a cleaner on B block at St. Jude's, and he was a bit of a singer also, a soul singer. The stage name he went by was Lover Man, and it would be fair to say there wasn't an Al, a Smokey, a Stevie, or a Marvin he hadn't taken a pop at. He had this low, bassy growl on him, and there'd been a rumour one time a big label had been serious about signing him. A rumour started by Franklin himself. The only signing going on now were his initials that sprouted up over every cleaning timetable perched over B-block toilets. He wasn't going anywhere. Junior doctors in their white coats flapped off and away. Interns, nurses finished their training at Jude's and shot off. Australia, Dubai. There was one place he really wanted to go, the US of A. His trip would be a pilgrimage. He'd hit up all the great soul shrines. Sun Studios for St. Otis, Detroit for St. Smokey, and saving the greatest for last, Alabama for St. Aretha Franklin. But here he was still, Nowheresville. The canteen queue wasn't shifting. Time to fiddle with his playlist, fine-tune it for tonight. He liked to keep things fresh and change the running order. His rehearsals generally took place around about B block staircase. He would open with Luther Vandross, Never Too Much. Then This Old Heart, it was near enough Valentine's Day to warrant that. And he'd finish with Have You Seen It, to spice things up on the third floor when he could groove with the waxer. The queue was slow moving. Time enough for a warm-up. He inhaled for 4, exhaled for 10. And a bit of nostril clearing next. 2 nurses from casualty turned round startled, and he was halfway through the throat gargler when the curtain of steam parted and the McGranahan manifested herself behind the silver counter. Tonight she blazed in the glory of a mauve St. Jude's tabard. Her hair a crown of braids dyed mauve to match. Her shoulders ran glossy with sweat, and she fixed a look on him. Putting folks off their break again, Franklin, and Loverman was smitten and terrified in equal parts. A small Ribena, please, Simone, and a large chamomile tea, he squeaked. He was the only gent in the staff canteen that went in for the herbals. He'd heard they were good for the throat, and for the heartburn he was a martyr to. Simone smirked and turned to kick the churning dishwasher. The machines at St. Jude's were the only things that dared disobey her. Livingston was peckish and took the opportunity to half-inch a Scotch egg. And she'd been known to let him get away with a freebie if she was in one of her reasonable moods. Yeah, she wasn't. She dinged his knuckles with a fish slice and he dropped the egg, and it staggered off along the canteen floor, kerboinging between chair legs. A junior doctor went in with a rugby tackle and on his table, passed the egg back up the line to Livingston. He faked a laugh and picked off the fluff stuck to the egg. That'll be £6.70p, Simone stuck out her hand. And you'll want to give that egg a scrub, it'll be riddled. Livingston briefly considered the mystery of McGranahan's own riddled heart. 2 whole years he'd been knocking on her door, so to speak. Though the canteen counter was hardly the place to talk about matters of the heart, he'd been reckless. He'd invoked her magnificent namesake, Nina Simone. Did that name not mean anything to her? It had not. He'd had to go with I Put a Spell on You and the last 2 verses of My Baby Just Cares for Me, right there in the canteen. Come and hear me for real, he begged her. Come and check out the band just one time. I can stick you on the guest list. His band, Loverman and the Lover Brothers, played the graveyard shift on Mondays down the Butcher's Arms. The Butcher's Arms were down the end of the street to St. Jude's, which was handy since the butcher's clientele had traditionally been in the habit of starting in the one and finishing the night off in the other. But the band had just scored a new slot, Friday, biggest night of the week. Come tonight, he chipped away at the beauteous McGranahan exterior until she cracked. And the drinks will be on you? Livingston squeaked his assent. Okay, fine. Simone nodded in the direction of Rita Ian No's throat, who recently seemed to be on all the same breaks as Livingston. You stick her on the guest list too. Mind, she's a porn star martini sort of girl, aren't you, Rita? Rita smirked and said, and nibbles, Franklin, don't forget the nuts. And the 2 women cracked up. Rita and Livingston had had a number of run-ins. The most recent had been to do with a box of chocolate Brazil nuts. Rita had caught him circling the nurse's station, slopping his mop until the coast was clear. He was after a rummage in the nurse's chocolate stash. Grateful, and it had to be said, deeply unimaginative patients heaped the nurses with cellophane wrapped boxes of Quality Street, Black Magic, and After Eights. All cheap crap. Too much creamy chocolate gunked up his throat when he came across 2 boxes of Brazil nuts. Bonanza. He'd been shoveling them in when Rita had got up in his see up to your tricks again. A nut jam skeways in his gullet. Just something for, for the singing. Bit of energy, he said. Those come from that gent in the end bed, she said. His daughter brings them a box every day. And he just sits there, sucking off the chocolate and spitting each nut back in the box. Franklin felt the nuts burning all the way down his windpipe. Rita turned and walked away. See you down the butcher's. The heartburn was back. The big night wasn't going to plan. The lover men were unpacking their amps on the butcher's tiny stage. According to Aubrey, Terry, the new manager at the butcher's, was looking to shake things up. Yeah, he says, Friday night to the dog's bollocks. So we've got ourselves a promotion then, says Livingston. He's sending about extra money. Bound to be, said Aubrey. Longer set, more work. We're on first and it's disco boogie or something. And different punters, completely different punters, Terry says. He wasn't wrong. Monday nights were 12, 13 customers tops. Mondays were the Jamaican gents clacking dominoes at the big window seat, and a few afternoon shifters from St. Jude's, who dribbled in for a quick one on the way home. Now and again they got the odd terrifying nurse's hen night, braying for antics that a lover man felt ill-equipped for. On these occasions he rued his mum's Dundee side for his physical shortcomings, his freckles and his ginger beer coloured ringlets. Though now his hair was dropping out, that was less of a problem, or more of one. Whatever, resembling a ginger Oompa Loompa was never going to be a top look for a soul man. It had held him back, no doubt about it. Franklin looked around. The bar was filling up. A lot of lads, all dressed up, was heaving. And the only ladies in the house were smack in the front, Rita and Simone. And from what Franklin could make out from the stage, Rita and Simone had every wine glass in the house fighting it up on their hectic tabletop. And a silvery wine bucket with 2 bottles, no, 3 sticking out. He hadn't sung a note yet. Loverman felt the heartburn coming on. Playlist okay, he said to the band. And the band seemed a bit off with him. Aubrey was in a moody, said he'd left Franklin at least 6 messages on his mobile, and how come Franklin never bothered getting back? Franklin nodded over at Simone and Rita. Been a bit busy, haven't I? Aubrey followed his look. The both of them, Liv. Oh, you amaze me. Franklin knew that Aubrey lived with his old mum, and the rest of the Lover brothers' love life was nothing to write home about either. Keith bounced around the sofas of any ex still speaking to him, and Wicks the Sticks was crashing at his granddad's. You might want to check your phone, Aubrey said. The boys and me, we've been thinking about making a few changes. Funny that, Franklin glared. Yeah, me too. The Lover brothers had been on the slide a good while. Standards had slipped like the trickle of ketchup down Aubrey's cream lapels. It's showtime now, the other stuff would just have to wait. Livingston buttoned up his jacket. South London, he gurgled. The mirror ball blinded him. I hope you're in the mood tonight for a bowl of soul. You're in with... His voice wobbled. He'd never frozen before. We're the Lover brothers and we've got... The feedback was making his filling scream. Aubrey Casey on the bassy, Wick Sticks, cooking up tricks, and the band just turned their backs on him. They always performed a little showboating after each name check. But tonight of all nights, they couldn't be asked. I'm Loverman, and tonight I want to dedicate the first song to a certain special, and the mic skidded. The band screeched into Let's Get It On without waiting for Franklin. Franklin looked down to see Rita Iano's throat's hands crawling all over Simone's backside, which led him to make a dog's dinner of I Believe in Miracles, when there was a skirmish. Someone down the front was clambering up. A stage invasion, their first one ever. It was a tiny lad in a glitter jumpsuit. If Simone and Rita could just take a breather from the tongue massages, they'd be well impressed. Proper fans, crazy fans. Livingston stepped across to gently remonstrate, but Glitter Boy swung the mic off him. Franklin took a dive. Aubrey nutted him and the room exploded. The boys in glitter were looking mutinous. More lads piling up on the stage now, joining in. And Disco Boogie boys had no manners, it seemed. Franklin flew at the Glitter Boy with the mic stand, but Glitter Boy was a hell of a lot stronger than he looked, and had been joined by a chap in feathers and chiffon who sent Franklin flying. Franklin got carried up the butchers and suffered the indignity of being patched up in St. Jude's A&E. His phone kept pinging away. Aubrey. 7 stitches, Franklin told him. 7 stitches, 1 busted lip and a black eye. You can tell Terry to stuff his Fridays. Liv, we've been trying to tell you. The Loverman stuff, it's lame, it's old school. It's done. Terry's after this massive makeover that we can be part of if we just change. Franklin spat out a tooth, together with one word into the phone. Judas. He thought it wiser to leave things with McGranahan for a while and dodge the canteen, and he took to bringing in a thermos of herbal tea from home. Tonight the rota was the usual. B block stairs, orthopedics, cardio. Franklin had copped the lane cart, the one with a tendency to steamroll your toes, which happened straight off. Thank you very much, he said out loud to the empty corridor. He needed a belter to distract him from throbbing. Love Train. The end of the corridor had a bit of reverb and gave the song a rousing kick, the rousing kick it needed. Livingston swirled the broom like a mic stand. Darren from maintenance was passing and gave him a thumbs up. Next was I Believe in Miracles, which was wicked for the sort of stabby mop attack he needed for the main staircase. Smooth as silk he was tonight, even with the missing tooth. He backed up the mop wagon and started on a slow glissando with Try a Little Tenderness. The lift opened and Mikey pushed out a trolley prepped for theatre. Nice one, Frank. These were his audience, these were his people. Right, he was going solo. The Lover brothers had been a buggery ball and chain. He'd been carrying them forever. Should have got rid way back. It was going to be his time. Top of B block staircase now. You could let all hell loose here. B block atrium of St. Jude's Royal Albert Hall, acoustically speaking. If you sang into the stairwell, it rippled all the way down and floated back up. A woman's voice. Excuse me, I was just looking for someone. He braked his cart. The woman disappeared into the shadows of cardio. It's my father. She had shining eyes and a lilting voice. She led him over to a corner bed and tugged the curtain. Could you just keep him company so I can get something from the canteen? And if he wakes, just say Aretha will be straight back. Aretha? He'll be in good hands, Aretha, Franklin said. He pulled the curtains about the bed and looked down at the shape of the small man, buried under wires. The bed was lit with a low blue light. There was a hum of soft bleeps. Franklin waited on the oxygen pump to count himself in. Yeah, going solo had been the right move for him. Here he was, already doing a private engagement. All the great soul men, Otis, Curtis, Marvin, they'd thrown off the shackles of their bands, and they'd soared, they'd rocketed. He didn't have to think about the playlist, he had the songs. He started low, and his voice sounded good to him in this dim space. Fierce and tender both. when a man loves a woman. One tear, then two, dropped from Livingston's eyes and pinged on the heart monitor. This is what he should have been doing all along. Songs of healing to people who appreciated his talent. What a plonker he'd been, pissing it away down the butcher's. The ventilator suddenly lost its rhythm and lurched in a crazy frenzy, the monitor flashing yellow. In amongst the churned sheets, the patient was struggling and trying to surface. Another man went on singing, not missing a beat. The bleeper stopped bleeping and the patient became calm. The shining-eyed lady rushed up now and parted the curtain. Did he ask for me? Franklin shook his head. It's all good now. The ventilator ran sweet again. His heart thudded. He started alto with I Say a Little Prayer. He sank across the bed to the lady with wet cheeks. And in the electric blue light, with the curtains drawn, they locked gazes. And Livingston Franklin sang full into the heart of Aretha. Best performance of his life.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Next, we're going to hear from Martin Nathan, who, as most of you will know, is my co-host on Story Radio. Martin's short fiction and poetry has appeared in a range of journals, and his novel, A Place of Safety, is published by Salt Publishing. His dramatic writing has been shortlisted for the Nick Dark Award and the Woodward International Prize. Thank you.
Thank you. Continuing the Valentine's theme, this is called Fortune Cookie. Paul was riding hard, his thigh muscles filled with blood for that last bit of power as he reached the peak of the hill. A familiar pain stirred in his left side as the chain threatened to slip on the cog. His bike needed a lot of attention these days, but a broken chain would be an excuse to be late for the party. He stopped and poured tea from a thermos. One day, he would get to build a bike out of the best parts and have one thing in his life that was new and perfect. The early evening mist spread over the valley in wispy trails, and dense lines of cloud marked the course of the river. He needed to get going. His anniversary party, 10 years together. Alice had spent the night at his parents' house, where her parents kept her bedroom always ready for her return. His offer to help with the party had been refused. His role was to remain in the background. The yellow dot of Venus lurked above the horizon, over the hills of his father-in-law's farm. One day it would all pass to Alice. He shook his cup dry and got on the bike for the final stretch. It could have been so different if it stuck to the original plan it made all those years ago, when he booked their table at for Valentine's Day. It was a double happiness, the Chinese restaurant they frequented for its convenience rather than quality, where the staff overdid the warmth of their greeting. The music lived forever with the same 5 Yellow River favourites. The staff must get so sick of it, Alice had whispered. It's amazing what you get used to, Paul said. His plan had been to tell her that while they'd had some good times together, it would be better for them to accept that their relationship was reaching its end. He kept rewording that speech so that she would understand it was a sacrifice on his part to set her free. But a lot could happen in the time between making a booking and the event itself. And his hip pocket bulged with a ring box, and as he sat down to wait for the right moment. Everything had reached a crisis that afternoon. When the audit had started earlier in the week, he felt calm, especially when Mr. Simmons, the accountant, had announced he was retiring. They celebrated with a glass of sherry, and Paul felt confident that this would be the quickest audit ever. Then someone else came to join them. Miss Phillips is taking over from me, and I expect she'll be just as thorough as I am, Mr. Simmons winked. But as Miss Phillips gazed at him, she seemed to see something very wrong without even checking the books. Paul had started making up for his poor pay some years ago, with small amounts here and there, but they'd built up, and he fantasised about hitting them properly one day and disappearing. But now it was too late. He spent the next few days making excuses as she requested documents and invoices that had never existed, and asking about records that could not be reconciled. He took up smoking and hid outside, but she was always there with a list of more documents she needed. The prickle of his childhood alopecia under his hairpiece made him want to jump in his car and drive far, far away. But it was a company car and was due a service. He told the order he would explain everything, and then he drove to the jeweller's to buy the most expensive engagement ring. They were playing lush romantic strings in the restaurant, and a man in a damp anorak came round to sell individual roses. Paul watched his journey as the couples exchanged promises over Peking duck and pork balls. The moment had arrived, and Paul produced the ring. Alice stared at him in disbelief. The golden cat mocked him with its waving arm. Alice was about to say no. His escape plan had failed. He felt a thrill at the prospect of his coming disgrace, his punishment and exile. He would be forced into a new life. But the cheers rose around the restaurant as Alice put the ring on, and the owner poured them drinks from a dusty bottle of Asti Spumante. "For my favourite customers," he said as the staff toast their future happiness. "I thought you were going to break up with me," Alice said later in the car. She looked at the ring and squeezed his hand. "Why? Is that what your fortune cookie said?" "They never say things like that," she said. Paul's fortune cookie was still in his pocket, its message unread. Alice's parents accepted their engagement without any pretence of happiness, and her mother began the wedding plans. His parents were anxious. "They do know we've got no money," his father said. "They'll pay for it all." "Can we invite people?" Paul knew what that meant. Aunt Angela, she was not good at parties. "You can invite people." Paul's only involvement in the arrangements to insist they got married as soon as possible. The more committed everyone was, when the news of his mistake emerged, the better. He confessed to the auditor and promised to pay everything back. The contempt had triggered a powerful, almost sexual response in him. The managing director sent him home while he decided what to do. A week later he was called back in, and his father-in-law was sitting with the managing director. They played golf together. "You're a very lucky man," the managing director said. His father-in-law would repay the money, and they would not press charges. Paul would work in a junior role, closely supervised, and all his pay would go towards repaying his debt. He handed over the keys of his company car, and his father-in-law offered him a lift home, but he caught the bus instead. Alice's engagement ring went back to the shop, but the arrangements for the wedding continued. Alice controlled their money, and Paul began a new life free of responsibility. Paul's parents knew nothing of his mistake when the inevitable meeting between the parents took place, and the obvious signs of wealth sent them into overblown humility. After the meeting, Alice's father seemed less contemptuous of Paul. He realised that none of this was really Paul's fault. He had just made a poor choice in his parents and couldn't be blamed for the degenerate state of the lower classes. Their wedding was a subdued affair with real tears. When Paul's aunt Angela collapsed in a drunken heap, she had to be driven home, and Paul envied her escape. He, however, had adopted a new ascetic regime which involved abstention from alcohol. He relished his life without money, despite his freakish state in the office and the looks of scorn as he emerged from the shower room in his crumpled 10-year-old suit. Conversations stopped as he passed. He was the only thing of interest that had happened in 10 years there. Alice begged him to get a new suit, but he preferred to wear the old one. They no longer visited the Chinese restaurant. They did not have holidays. They lived around each other silently as he counted off the days of his indeterminate sentence. Now, after 10 years, Alice's parents met Paul's parents once more to discuss the arrangements for the anniversary party, and his parents were meek as ever, terrified they might be expected to contribute. In terms of guests, who would he be inviting? Alice's mother said. "Well," Paul's mother said, "there's Aunt Angela." "Really?" Alice's mother sighed, and her father poured himself another drink. "She'll be fine," his father said. "Paul will keep an eye out for her." Paul and her, both social exiles, he'd found her at the wedding in a drunken sleep under a pile of coats, her lipstick smeared around her face, and she kept crying when he woke her. "You're such a good boy," she kept saying to him. "I'm so proud of you." A couple of days before the anniversary party, Paul's hairpiece had disappeared. Alice had been pleading with him to get a new one, and so he guessed she had hidden it. He dug out his old one from the cupboard with its orange tint and synthetic wave. At least we can stick it in the washing machine when it gets dirty, Alice said, and grabbed it as they wrestled for it and ended up making love for the first time in a long time. Paul's heart was still pounding as he freewheeled into the drive where his father-in-law was putting up a sign to direct cars into the field. He shook his head. I can't believe it. The grown man's still cycling everywhere. Alice's micro's in this shed. Paul found Alice looking worried. Oh, you're here. My father wants to give a speech, so you need to say something too. What have I got to say? After 10 years of marriage, you've got nothing to say. He showered and tried to find words that were superficially inoffensive, but carried an undercurrent of grievance. As he scrubbed himself with a loofah, he realised the hair was coming off his legs. Soon it formed a mass that clogged the drain. When we sat in that restaurant on Valentine's Day 10 years ago, Alice opened a fortune cookie. That was how he would begin. He still had to make up the message that followed. His parents arrived with Aunt Angela, who seemed clear-headed and energised. I can't believe it. You, all grown up and married. She'd been his favourite relative when he was young. She spoiled him, taking him out to places, but as he got older, he found her presence and the way she fussed around him difficult. Paul busied himself taking round trays of snacks, even though they had waiting staff. He limited his engagement with the guests to the briefest replies. Yes, thanks. It's flown by. No, we're happy as we are. These people in their smart clothes and expensive dresses and jewels made him feel proud of his lumpy suit and alarming hairpiece. You're so lucky. Alice is so lucky, his mother said, and his father mellowed under the force of food and alcohol. Paul tried to keep Angela occupied, listening to her rambling stories about her time as a teacher of troubled children, and topped up her glass with lime and soda. You're such a good boy, Paul. A boy to be proud of, she said, gripping his hand. Paul's father sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper. I can't make speeches, he said. I don't know what to say. Alice's father tapped his glass and the room became silent. Paul wondered how he could have such authority. His father-in-law's speech was long and detailed all about Alice's achievements, from dancing and horse riding to school prizes and a degree. He talked about her generosity and paused before describing her forgiving nature, which is the closest he came to referencing Paul. Alice thanked her father, her mother, and Paul for 10 years of interest. And then it was Paul's turn, but he'd forgotten to invent his fortune cookie message. So he signalled to his father, who stood up with his blank sheet, and said, "To the happy couple." Paul's mother got up, and he felt embarrassed that she could find so many positive things to say about him, ending with saying how he had the inner strength to see a thing through right to the end, and he felt touched. 10 years. Maybe it was over. He was about to speak, but a long, deep groan came from the corner of the room, and Aunt Angela fell to the floor. It was a suck of air and the rattle of someone whose pharynx had collapsed. Paul sat in the kitchen with his aunt, wiping her face and dressed with a damp kitchen towel while Alice buzzed around. What are we going to do? I knew this would happen. She gave him her car keys. It's better if you take her home. Angela sat in the car. Someone had driven over his fallen bike, buckling the front wheel and the forks. He started the engine. His aunt's eyes were open as she stared straight ahead. You must be so ashamed of me, he said. I'm not ashamed. You're a good boy. I'm not. He put the car in gear and they lurched forward. Even my driving is shit. You don't need to be ashamed, and neither do I. As he drove, he still felt buoyed by his mother's speech, but one part puzzled him. He turned out so much better than I expected, she had said. They arrived at Angela's bungalow, and he helped her upstairs, where she flopped on the bed. He pulled the covers over her and fetched her a glass of water. Her wig slipped, revealing sparse cropped hair. She looked helpless and vulnerable. When he asked his mother why he was an only child, she said the doctor had told her she couldn't have children, but then suddenly he appeared. A miracle baby. Aspirin, Angela said, pointing at the bedside table, the cabinet. He opened the drawer, stuffed deep with elaborate underwear, reds and pinks and purples with laces and frills and ruffles. As he went deeper, he found banknotes. 10s, 20s were soon lying on the carpet. Hundreds of pounds. He'd not held money for so long. So much cash. He found the aspirin. And a photograph. Angela, impossibly young, holding a baby like she would never let it go. And everything made sense. He examined Angela's face carefully. No wonder it turned out the way he had. He stuffed handfuls of notes into his pocket and closed the drawer. He sat in the car, counting the money, and constructed his dream bike in his head, with all the best components. Fulcrum wheels, Shimano gears, Campagnolo brakes. His years of penury were over. He was going to have the best, regardless of cost. He would go back to the party and make his speech. Fortune chimes on those who act boldly.
So this is a story about love, airplanes and death. So a bit dark. The middle seat. Jerry sat in the middle seat of row 12, waiting to take off. He couldn't sit still. The plane was so quiet. Usually a baby would be crying, or a couple of lads would be laughing on their way to a match, or a suit would be furiously typing on a laptop, finishing off an email before the plane went into flight mode. Not this time. A deathly white noise filled the capsule. As if the plane was a fridge, the doors were shut, and no one could get out. Jerry looked around. A few passengers wore masks over their faces. A few held them by their cords around their wrists. Others just shut their eyes. At one stage someone sneezed. Everyone turned. Some buried their heads in their hands. He'd got one of the last flights out. He'd been working in London and had devoured the news like everyone else. When word came that it was now or never to leave, he'd spent the night refreshing the airline webpage until he managed to get a seat. Home to Dublin to see Mel. He hadn't seen her in months. Yes, they'd spoken, but he missed her strong back and muscular shoulders, the way she drank and smoked like she meant it, how bloody red her face would go when she laughed. He wanted to experience this, whatever this was, with her. He loved her. Jerry hated the middle seat. It wasn't because he couldn't look out of the window like he used to as a child, or that he couldn't stretch his legs like he could on the aisle. It was because he was just there, stuck, in between, nowhere to go. Also, he knew that at some stage there would be a situation where he'd have to pass empty cartons of food and drink along to the steward, like at some charity function, and there'd be the risk of getting drips of coffee and beer onto his trousers. And then there was the time when he had to climb over the snoring fella next to him so he could go to the toilet, and leant a bit too eagerly on the seat in front, which resulted in a heated conversation that meant that by the time he had concluded that discussion, he was told he had to sit back down, as they were about to land and the toilets were now closed. He'd asked if he could switch seats when he boarded the flight. No! The skinny steward with the cream shirt and trousers that let off an electric fuzz said, "The flight's only an hour. I'm sure you'll survive." Survive? Jerry asked himself. Well, he thought he'd got away with it and had a free seat on either side. He could maybe lie down or sit in the window seat for a few minutes and then the aisle. Luxury. That was until two passengers bounded on board, heaving shoulder bags and duty-free, and for some reason a lampshade. "Sorry, mate," one of them said as he squeezed past and practically fell on Jerry as he sat down by the window. "Middle seat," he said. "Bad luck." As the plane bumped its way into thick dark clouds, the two men introduced themselves. They held out their hands, like at a wedding, which Jerry reluctantly shook before wiping it on the plastic seat. Paul was by the window, George on the aisle. Paul told Jerry that the two men lived and worked in Thailand and were on their way home to see their families. They didn't believe in this scamdemic, as they called it, and there was no way that they'd inject any vaccination muck into them if it came to that. They'd rather die than be told what to do. But they'd promised their families that they'd go home for a while, until this all blew over, be good husbands and stop playing around. Jerry winced as Paul spoke. He didn't know what to say. What would he say? He wasn't about to get into an argument about vaccinations and the like with these two. Anyway, there was nowhere to go. "Look, if we die, we die," Paul said nonchalantly, in a way that Jerry thought was unreal. "Here, Georgie," Paul continued.
Did I tell you about the time I nearly died? He leant to his left and in front of Jerry as if he wasn't there, leaning his heavy craft of a body onto him, his breath stale with beer, his gut popping through the buttons in his shirt. His face was like a derelict building, all sharp angles and cracked glass. The thing is, Paul coughed, I did almost die. Bloody truck skidded on the sand as I was driving home on Coast Samui. Granted, I'd had a few, of those Thai whiskies, but the road, what did I tell you? They sprinkle the road with sand. You've got to be so careful. But one corner, always that corner, the car just flipped. Ooh! He paused and turned his hand up and down in front of his face. Paul started to sweat. His breathing became heavy. He coughed. I never felt anything like it, he continued. There I was, lying on my back with a truck on top of me, and I just crawled out the window. Luckily enough, I'd bought a truck that could cope with a crash like that, but there in the distance she was. I can tell you now, Georgie, I was in love. There she fucking was. Big Buddha. Sitting there, cross-legged at the end of the beach, gleaming, dripping with gold, sunlight banging off her, and I started to crawl, like I was dead. Well, I thought I was dead. The light, it was so beautiful, I thought I was dreaming. It was like she was talking back to me, my face lovely and warm, and I thought this was it. This was where I want to spend the rest of my days. Here, next to Big Buddha, on that beach. I tell you, that's how I want people to remember me, Paul. That fella who loved Big Buddha. Here, you listening? Paul turned to George. Jerry had noticed that George had started to watch La La Land on his phone. What are you watching that for? Paul mumbled as he slumped back into his chair. The plane emerged from some clouds and fell into a blast of turbulence. Jerry gripped the armrest and pushed his head back against his seat. At one stage the plane leapt aggressively. Some passengers laughed. Someone was crying. Jerry held his hand onto his eyes and scrunched them tight. George continued to watch La La Land and hummed some of the songs to himself. Paul rested his head on the fold-down table. Every now and then Jerry's elbow fought with George's on the armrest until one of them would disengage. After a few minutes, George put down his phone. I remember it clear as day, George said. He spoke to the chair in front. His voice was loud and clear like he learned to sing. A scraggy beard covered his red face. His large chest took over his body. He wore a waistcoat over a white shirt and had that look of a dishevelled opera singer. What was that? Paul asked. That boat. Do you remember that boat? Of course I do. I loved that boat. And she loved me, George continued. We did everything together. Pedalled here, pedalled there, around the islands. We pedalled to Koh Phi Phi one day. Do you remember? Paul nodded. Built her myself. Hard work that. I didn't train as an engineer at Wilson's for nothing. Learnt everything I know from all that. It was that storm. Do you remember? I was by myself. Just thought I'd go out for a little pedal. Up and down the beach and then just got swept out. I couldn't control her. Like she had a mind of her own. Them waves. The size of houses crashing down. We nearly flipped. The pedals going crazy. My legs couldn't keep up and I just thought pedal faster, but I couldn't. And then there was this moment. Like a light shone on me and it was as if the world was dragging me into itself. Do you know what I mean? Paul looked over at George at this point and he said, yeah, that's funny. It's exactly how I felt. And then there was this moment when both men leant forward and looked into each other's eyes. It was brief, perhaps a split second, but Jerry wondered as the plane continued to bounce around if they were about to hold hands over him for the rest of the flight. Don't mind me, he wanted to say. You two go ahead and reminisce about your near-death experiences and leave me here to listen and watch the two of you hold hands. Yeah, go on, lads. You go right ahead. Look, who am I anyway, and did I pay to listen to you two go on like this? And will you forever leave me alone? And then Paul coughed violently. Jerry tightened. George leant over and banged Paul on the back. Jerry held his face in his hands. Paul coughed onto the window. Jerry held his breath. Paul wiped some sweat off his forehead. His face was flushed. Jerry felt like shrinking into himself, collapsing his body into the chair, hollowing out. All he could think of now was Mel. He wanted to feel her warmth on his. He wanted out of this plane, this seat. He'd never had a near-death experience, but now that he was here, in the middle, with nowhere to go, maybe this was what it felt like. The news reports were bad. Maybe there was no better time than now to declare his fear of dying in front of strangers he'd never see again. Tell them that he didn't want to die. Not here. Not now. Not before seeing Mel. It was then that he noticed other passengers around him had started to pull on their masks. Maybe they knew something he didn't. Maybe they'd heard Paul coughing. Jerry didn't have a mask. He hadn't got around to buying one. Paul continued to laugh. They were 10 minutes from landing. The toilets were closed. The rubbish collected. Jerry itched to get up. His legs were shaking, and then he reached up with his arm. He pressed the overhead panel. It didn't budge. He stood up and pushed it. "Sit down, sir," a steward shouted at him. He ignored them. He pressed the panel harder. It still didn't budge. Paul looked at him bemused. George was fixated on La La Land. Jerry stood up and punched the panel. His fist made a dull thud. His knuckles sparked from the coarse plastic. "Fuck," he said, recoiling. The panel sprung open. Out dangled a yellow airplane mask with white elastic bands. Jerry grabbed it. He strapped it around his face. He started to breathe. Fresh air surged into him, oxygenating him. The wheels came down. He smiled. He knew he'd soon be away from this. He'd see Mel. He'd hold her. They would go through this together. Land emerged through the clouds. His breathing slowed. The land nearer now, closer. And then a surge of engines. Bodies back against seats. The plane tilted up, not down. "Jesus," someone cried. Rain poured off the plane. His heart was in his mouth. The wheels folded back into the fuselage. Sweat poured off him. There was nothing for it. He grabbed Paul and George's hands and started in a muffled voice behind his mask. Lads, can I tell you about the time I nearly died?" Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mickey. That one was written especially for this, wasn't it?
It was,
Yeah, brilliant. Now we're going to hear from Lana Citron. Lana is a prize-winning author and scriptwriter with 20 years professional writing experience. She has published 5 novels, 2 non-fiction books, and numerous short stories, plays, poems, film scripts, articles, and books. Welcome back, Lana.
Thank you. I'm not gonna, so I do write fiction. I did end up writing 2 non-fiction books. One, which is this, A Compendium of Kisses. And it came out now a long time ago, back in 2012. And it was Book of the Week, The Economist. Very happy. Nothing that ever happened to me. Anyway, it was translated into various languages, and it's still a subject I'm really, really interested in, actually. I became completely fascinated with the kiss and the art of everything about it. I can call you. So tonight I'm going to give you like a brief introduction to the subject, and then we can practice the art of kissing. It's not compulsory. I'm not going to hurt anybody with this. Yeah, just, okay. Are there any couples in tonight? Okay. So, so basically I was kind of completely captivated by the myriad of meanings attached to the kiss. Turns out it's like super potent, super mercurial, and basically touches every part, every aspect of our lives. Right, I'm going to go off script until I need to go back on it. Anyway, so when you think about it, we're born, we're welcomed into the world with a kiss. When it comes to die and to leave, we depart with a kiss. Okay, and this continues on. So a kiss can be life-giving. We have the kiss of life. It can be dangerous. Vampire kiss, mafia kiss, infectious. There are kissing diseases. Leper kissing in medieval times was a practice that kings and nobles did. We have deadly kisses. The kiss of death. The Judas kiss. So he goes into the Garden of Gethsemane. It's hugely symbolic. He doesn't say to the Roman soldiers, "It's your man over there." He doesn't point. He kisses Jesus. Judas goes and kisses Jesus. So it was very fascinating and hugely powerful. We have religious kisses, pax kisses. There are kiss scandals, stolen kisses, kissing games, spin the bottle, political kisses. There are lipless kisses, and there are eyelash kisses, okay? Not to be confused with the Glasgow kiss, which is basically a headbutt. Okay, so we're going to start with the basics. What actually is a kiss? According to Dr. Henry Gibbons, he describes it as the anatomical juxtaposition of two orbicularis orbis muscles in a state of contraction, which basically means its physicality can be likened to a drawstring purse being pulled incredibly tight together. Okay? And in order to osculate, which is Latin for kiss, one requires the use of all 34 facial muscles along with 112 postural muscles. So, this kissing of one's lips upon another's is a gesture that engages all the senses. So think about it. It's like touch, taste, smell, sound, and depending on the depth of passion can ignite a plethora of emotional, sensual, and physical reaction. French philosopher Voltaire warns, "Behold the danger. There is one nerve which goes from the mouth to the heart and thence nowhere." Kissing is considered by both sexes to be the upper persuasion for a lower invasion. That said, and this is one thing I found incredibly interesting, women use kissing as a mate assessment device. You laugh, but it is scientifically proven. So turns out women have a greater sense of taste and smell than men. And they are looking for men with the opposite immune system proteins to them. They want healthier offspring. And it all begins to make sense. And guess what? When I kind of went further into the research, I understood that when women take the pill, that subdues that instinct. It completely takes it away. And they lose that. So I thought it was really, really fascinating. And I used to give talks way back. And I'd be in a room of young women. And I'd go, haven't you ever had a kiss that like just was so amazing, so sublime, like electric? And they were all like, no. And I was like, well, no. How many of you are on the pill? And they were like, I mean, it's really incredible. On the other hand, men, they use kissing to judge. They judge by the moistness of the kiss, just to see how lucky they're going to get. Surprise, surprise. Okay, yeah. So, indeed, many people regard romantic kissing as more intimate than sex. And I would agree. I would totally agree with that. And I think when you think about like traditional prostitution, prostitutes traditionally never kiss. They never kiss the clients because it's synonymous with genuine desire and love. Okay. When you look at heterosexual porn, not that I have ever acted anything like that, but apparently the kiss is absent. It's absent. Whereas with homosexual porn, the kiss is present. So it's really interesting, these different things. So undoubtedly, male and females agree that it is a most pleasurable activity. And as it turns out, there is an infinite variety of ways in which a kiss can be delivered, upon what and where. So, William, please come up. Just stand there and hold me. You have to. So I am just going to work along the body and point out different types of kisses. Okay. So we start with the ground beneath his feet. Yes. Kissing has been used as a symbol of power, and in contrast, abject humility. Okay. So there is a definite hierarchy established in the practice of kissing. The lower one's rank historically, the nearer the ground. only equals ever kiss face to face. And we're all familiar with he kisses the ground I walk on, or she kisses the ground I walk on. And some may be familiar with the Pope. When he travels and goes to a new country, he will kiss the ground. Hugely symbolic. Okay? Next, see Martin's toes. Toe kissing. So this was a Christian ritual, originated with Mary Magdalena, who kissed Christ's feet and washed them with her tears. Now we work our way up the leg, between the shin and the calf. Yes. And kisses of subjugation were planted on this area, and this was very important between lieges and vassals who paid homage to their lords or their kings, and it was present in coronation ceremonies all over Europe. Okay. Now we get to the interesting bits. Thigh kisses. So, some of you will know Kama Sutra, yeah? Everyone's heard of it? It has a whole chapter devoted to the kiss. And there is one called the demonstrative kiss. This is when a woman is shampooing her lover's body.
Right.
Yes. And she places her face on his thigh and feigns sleepiness. And basically, she then kisses his great toe, as it is referred to in the Kama Sutra. Then, if you would just like to turn around, we have the ass. Yes. So, kissing ass. You've all heard of that? Very, very powerful kiss. The osculum infame, or kiss of shame, which has always been associated with the devil, heretics, and witches. And the cities have fallen. Okay. The Knights Templar were accused of kissing ass, and they had to get out of Paris. It's amazing, amazing potency. I'll give you yes, okay. So you get the gist. All and every part of the body can be kissed, and there will be a different meaning attached to it, from the most base to the most pure. So seriously, the most pure kiss in Christianity, the wedding kiss. So soul meets soul on lover's lips. So said Percy Shelley. Okay? And by the same virtue, in a lot of African societies, it's the same thing. They believe the mouth is a portal to the soul, so it's completely forbidden, because you might invite in death or disease. Okay. Then we have Charles Darwin, who knows it, but when he went off traveling in various parts of the world, kissing is replaced by the rubbing of noses, also known as the smell kiss. What I found fascinating, because one of the questions was whether it's instinctive. Is it nature or nurture? Is it an instinctive gesture? Like, where does it come from? But all cultures kiss, but the romantic kiss, that is such a huge part of Western civilization, that is not universal, totally universal. And even today, it is regarded as a corrupting Western custom, and is still illegal in Dubai, UAE, and deemed taboo or frowned upon in parts of India, Indonesia, and some regions of Southeast Asia. And the Chinese, where again, just people did not kiss romantically, they likened Westerners to cannibals for kissing each other. So, we will move on now to what makes a good kiss. I'm in my notes. So basically it's chemistry. It's this idea of chemistry, and I hope you all will have experienced that kind of chemistry from the kiss, where it's like the knee buckle, isn't it? Where you just kind of go, it's like you want to eat someone. You actually want to devour them. And it's such a beautiful thing. But most people agree they like fresh breath and no food in the mouth, and just actually a really nice, fresh breath, natural smell. That's it. But for my last little piece, I will need two people. And come on. I'm not sure who.
Go on.
No, well, you need, someone has to kiss at the end of it. Okay. So someone has to play the male. Rebecca, you come.
Okay, come on.
Okay. And come. Yeah. You come.
No.
Or
kiss Laura.
Okay.
Go on, you go.
So,
My girlfriend gonna kill me.
Come on, Laura.
okay, Laura. Okay. So, okay. You will have to kiss at the end. Okay. So is it okay? You can manage that. Morgan takes him. A big round of applause for Morgan. That was very brilliant. Okay. So, I came across this incredible little book by C.C. Bombau, and it was called The Literature of Kissing. He's a Victorian wordsmith and poet. And he wrote this passage, which I just think is so cute, on how to kiss. Now, who's going to play the male and who's going to play the female? Because it's really important.
I don't mind. Tell her. I don't know.
Okay. No, I would like
to know.
Okay. I don't know. So you do. Who's taller?
I am.
Okay, that's it. Okay, so you're male. This is very old-fashioned.
It's very, I was going to say.
Okay, it's very old-fashioned. How to kiss. Now, you have to follow my instructions.
Okay.
Really carefully. Okay. And it's mainly you. People will kiss. Though not 1 in 100 knows how to extract bliss from lovely lips, any more than they know how to make diamonds from charcoal. Yet it is easy enough. First, know whom you are going to kiss. Yes?
Yes.
Do not jump up like a trout for a fly and smack a woman on the neck or the ear or the corner of her forehead or on the end of her nose. The gentleman should be a little taller. He should have a clean face, a kind eye, and a mouth full of expression. Oh, yes, we're looking at you. Do not kiss everybody. Do not sit down to do it. Stand up. Take the left hand of your lady. Take the left hand of your lady in your right and throw. Okay, you gotta listen. Throw your left hand gently over the shoulder of the lady.
I'm taking her left hand.
Yes,
Right. Okay. You ready?
Yes. Ready. And let it fall down the right side. Gently. Let it fall down. Is this your right side?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Fall down the right side. Okay. Do not be in a hurry. Draw her gently.
Gently, please.
Gently, lovingly to your heart. Her head will fall submissively on your shoulder.
Oh.
And a handsome shoulder strap it makes. Do not be in a hurry. Her left hand is in your right. Let there be an impression for that. Not like the grip of a vice, but a gentle clasp full of electricity.
Sorry.
Are you?
We're participating.
Yeah. Do not be in a hurry. Her head lies carelessly on your shoulder. You are heart to heart. Look down into her half-closed eyes. Gentle, but manfully. Press her to your bosom. Okay. Stand firm. Be brave. But do not be in a hurry. Her lips are almost open. Lean slightly forward with your head. Not the body.
Oh.
Take good aim. The lips meet. The eyes close.
Oh, that was a bit quick. It was a bit quick, wasn't it?
And the heart opens. And the art of kissing is learned.
Oh. Just so I'm close. There you go.
Have you heard that? Thank you. Learn something new.
What?
You were brilliant.
That was brilliant.
Well, that was fantastic, and I cannot compete with no audience participation here. But that was amazing. Thanks so much, Lana. That was incredible. Brilliant. Okay, so one more story, and then we will relax and have a drink. So I'm a short story novelist, being published in various literary magazines and anthologies. Has an honourable mention in the Alpine Fellowship Writing Prize for my story Pit. And I'm publishing my debut novel in 2026 with Frome Prose Publishing. So now I'm going to read a short story for you, which is tangentially a little bit romantic. The pleasures and pains of existence. The development team had been in place for 6 weeks now, and Marina had developed a routine which suited her. Along with 2 other developers, she lived in a shared house within striking distance of Canary Wharf. Anthony was all right. Jonathan didn't empty the dishwasher and left too much of his crap around in the living room, but she could put up with him. Any attempts at getting her to do more than her fair share of chores had been swiftly rebuffed, and the trio of young people now shared a cleaning service once a week. The decor in general ran the full gamut of rental colours from beige to magnolia, but she'd done her best, adding a bright duvet cover, scented candle and several photos in silver frames of her family, who would perhaps be surprised to know how much she missed them. Her workplace had intimidated her at first. She'd only graduated a year ago, and this was her first fintech job. It was unusual for a bank to have such a large in-house development team, rather than use an agency or work offshore, but they were creating cutting-edge financial products and wanted more control, they'd told her in an interview. The glossiness of the main bank building, the acres of marble and the hushed silence of the lobby, in which 2 reception staff sat marooned on a giant white desk, was off-putting. Security was heavy, and she had to wait while the ID card she'd been issued was scanned, and her bag was passed through a conveyor belt. Marina was born in 1994, the same year as the World Wide Web. As a kid, she had picked up maths about 10 times faster than any of the others at school. Rather than brats or colouring pencils, Marina was drawn to computers, and the minute she got her hands on the family's first PC, she was hooked. It was a pure and logical world where she felt at home, and to her parents, who fretted over the time she spent online or playing video games as a teenager, face bathed in the eerie glow of the screen, Marina pointed out her stellar exam results. After getting A's and A stars in maths, further maths, chemistry and physics, she went on to uni to study computer science, then straight on to work as a developer. The money was incredible compared to what most kids her age could earn, and her parents ceased to worry about her as her solitary and obsessive nature seemed to have been vindicated by her material success. The giant clocks Marina passed every day on her way to work told her the time in every major financial centre, and a ticker along the edge of one long building showed the latest stock prices. Each morning, once she had clocked in at precisely 8:30 a.m, she got into the lift to the 14th floor. It would have been 13, but in common with a lot of skyscrapers, they skipped unlucky 13 and went straight up. Marina was irritated by this every time she took the lift, but she had managed to overlook it. The lift moved so fast, it made her slightly queasy. Most developers working at the bank stuck to a variation on smart casual, chinos and shirts for the main part. She adapted this into her own uniform and wore it every day, Once she'd read about Mark Zuckerberg or someone doing this to save time, and it stuck. Simplifying your choices or eliminating the need to choose at all was more efficient in every way. The crucial thing was to be as non-core as possible, but avoid looking too distractingly female, and she had it down to a fine art. The area where they worked was open plan. This was supposed to help synergy, although Marina had to wear noise-cancelling headphones most of the time. She'd set the device on her wrist to remind her to stand up every hour. She would use this opportunity to walk to the giant windows and gaze out at the water. 2 cormorants were nesting on a floating jetty in the middle of the water, and it was good to see living things from the citadel of concrete and glass. Marina often spent time debugging others' code, as well as writing her own. The work had a meditative and frequently calming influence on her, almost like listening to a piece of music. She was good at spotting errors which jumped out at her like a discordant note. Twice a week, she hit the gym and spent 45 minutes on the treadmill. Her day ended at 6 p.m. when she would either go home or, on Fridays, go to a local bar with her fellow developers, where they would complain about that arsehole Dominic, their project manager, and drink too much. Every now and again, Marina would get teased about when she was going to get a boyfriend, but she brushed it off. She had had a couple of boyfriends at uni, but she dumped the last one, and she didn't want one right now. That stuff was a distraction. One of her housemates, Anthony, had asked her out on a date once, and she turned him down flat. This particular morning, which was in fact Valentine's Day, although she was oblivious to this, was similar to most of Marina's other mornings, apart from the large, buzzing object someone had placed on her chair. It was pink and had a vaguely ergonomic design. Marina stared at it for a moment before realising what it was. She didn't want to touch it, but the noise was insistent, so she found a paper napkin in her handbag and switched it to off. The next question was what to do about it. There was probably a procedure for this sort of thing. She could go to Dominic and complain. Bank would investigate. It would go on for a long time, and she suspected it would see her branded as a troublemaker, even though she had done nothing. Or she'd be seen as a bore, someone who couldn't even take a joke. Marina didn't know why jokes were so important, but she knew many people liked them. Without touching the device, she manoeuvred it into her bottom desk drawer. It could stay there until she worked out how to dispose of it without anyone noticing. She watched her colleagues carefully. It could be anyone out of the mostly male development team, or one of the bank's other employees, but she suspected it must be one of the guys she was closest to. Why would anyone else single her out? She'd gone and fined Jonathan and Anthony so far. Okay, Jonathan was a slob, and they'd had 1 or 2 arguments where he'd said she was being a nag before they got a housekeeper. That didn't seem like a big deal. Jonathan's workstation was opposite hers, and she glanced at him, unobserved. Slight suggestion of stubble, hooded eyes, good-looking in a slightly raffish way. Anthony was skinny and blonder, with a hesitant manner of speaking which often made people impatiently finish his sentences for him. Could it be because she had pointed out a major error in Jonathan's code last week? It seemed to take it well at the time, and surely it would reflect well on him as she had improved the code he'd written, without it being mentioned to Dominic in their weekly development meetings. Later, pounding away on the treadmill in the gym, she had an idea. Marina had the expertise to circumvent the bank's network security system, so it was no problem to install snooping software on her desktop without alerting the IT department. It would record any visits to her workstation via the webcam and any keystrokes made on the keyboard. She went further and hacked into the bank's main surveillance camera system as well. This way, from her laptop at home, she should be able to see anyone hanging around near her workstation. The system's files were digitally encrypted automatically every 24 hours, so she had no chance of spotting the person who had generously donated her the vibrator, but if anyone came back, she had a chance of catching them. It was the following week when the friend request popped up in her personal stream and she felt a shock of outrage. The fake account looked like her all right, but her cleavage was easily DD rather than Marina's more modest assets, and she wore a kind of revealing clothes that Marina wouldn't go near. The avatar was born in the same town as her, went to the same university, and was, to her horror, befriending a lot of her own friends and family. She was sleazy and ingratiating. The fake persona popped up in several places and even started a blog. Marina spent nights scouring the internet for her proliferating alter egos, trying to shut them down before they did too much damage. Dominic took her aside the next week. She was such a promising coder and they had such high hopes for her that her productivity was going down. Why? Marina felt angry tears prickling but held them back. She put a lock on her door at home and stopped going to the pub on Fridays. She was almost certain now that the people out to get her were Anthony and Jonathan, where her cyber traps had not been sprung. Both men had chatted to her about people in her photos and knew the name of her hometown and her parents' names. But she had no proof and didn't want to endanger her career. She apologised. Told Dominic she was having some personal problems, she'd stay focused. The next day, a video showed up on the bank's internal chat system called Jabber. It had been sent somehow from Marina's own account and was titled, "Had a good time last night." She was afraid to open it, but steeled herself and clicked play. A girl, identical in appearance to Marina, or digitally adjusted to appear so, was shown in a hotel room. She proceeded to take her clothes off. Marina pressed pause. 1 hour later, Marina had packed the possessions in her desk in a box, hiding the vibrator she hadn't got round to removing at the very bottom, and left the building. Her PC and network access was frozen, and her ID pass withdrawn. Dominic told her she'd been sent on gardening leave while the bank's management tried to figure out what to do about the inappropriate email. No more cormorants, no more giant ticking clocks, no more marble palace by the glittering Thames. Marina went home to her parents, sat in her old room, thought and coded furiously, her laptop gleaming away into the night. Lorem ipsum was originally the name of a piece of writing in Latin by Cicero called The Pleasures and Pains of Existence. In a baglarized form, web designers use it to add text to websites when the content isn't written yet. Modern websites nowadays separate all their styling and their content. But when the Lorem Ipsum software virus, unleashed later that month in Canary Wharf, started its work, decimating financial systems, starting with Marina's ex-employer, it emerged that what the virus had done was to break down the barrier between content and style, so that all words and numbers displayed on websites turned into gibberish. The resulting chaos wiped 5% of stock prices globally for several weeks as the virus rampaged across the globe. And only those who had been lucky enough to hedge their bets that week, such as Marina herself, did well. Unusually, the creators of the virus had signed their work, Anthony P. and Jonathan L. The two software engineers were let go despite their denials, but the bank didn't want any more publicity, so they were not prosecuted. Marina started up a web security company with particular expertise in dealing with Lorem Ipsum. One morning, Marina noticed unusual activity on the bank's security system, to which she still retained a well-hidden backdoor. A glitch had caused the encryption to fail, and she was able to play archived videos. Her hand was trembling as she clicked to play the video from 14th February 2015. Anthony and Jonathan were both in the office, working late. From her vantage point of the security camera in the ceiling, she could see both men. Eventually, Jonathan left the workstation. The camera continued rolling as Anthony, with a quick glance around the room, went over to Marina's desk and put something on it. Then Anthony left the office, gathering together his possessions and shutting the door behind him. Jonathan walked back in. He also took a quick look around and walked over to her desk, holding a box. She finally saw what Anthony had left on her desk as Jonathan, on camera, picked it up and dropped it in the bin. It was a Valentine's Day card. Jonathan smiled to himself and put the vibrator on her chair.
I'm sorry.
Thanks so much, everyone. That's the end of the show for tonight. I'd just like to say thank you so much to all our amazing writers. Can we have a big hand for them? And, we've got lots of books here.